And there's those of us in, France, the yellow vest movement was a pretty powerful thing.
That's true.
You want me to find Bobby and Victor?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Laura might know.
Okay. I don't know. There's some discussion about that. I don't think we need permission to. Like I was going to say, can we just read it once? The body of the. Can we just read it once?
What I would do is I would read it at the beginning, and then when it comes time to take a vote, if anyone still has questions, when anyone should read it again. But
I wouldn't even raise that.
it's going to be okay, right?
Yeah. Well, no, not for everyone. Okay, everybody, welcome. I'd like to bring the Hanover Town Meeting for 2023 to order. My name is Jeremy Eggleton. I'm the town moderator. Thank you very much for coming out. I think back on the last several years. We've found ourselves at Leverone for a couple of elections. We've found ourselves in the Dewey parking lot at Dartmouth College for a couple of town meetings. And even last year, when we welcomed ourselves back to Hanover High School, which is our true home, there were still a lot of people who were in masks and concerned about COVID. Some still are, and that's okay too. But it's really great to start seeing some more normalcy and to have a more normal town meeting. So thanks again for coming out tonight. Before we begin, I'd like to have Nancy Carter give us the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I may, I'd like to direct your attention to page 20 of your town report, which is the town moderator's message. In it are contained the moderator's rules for town meeting. I will take a motion from the floor to utilize this set of rules for tonight's meeting. So moved. Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Ms. Osmus. Any debate on that question? I'd like to call the question. All in favor of using the moderator's rules as set out on page 20, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much. Before we get started into the substance of tonight's meeting, I do want to have Alex Torpy, our new town manager as of last summer, briefly introduce the select board as well as the heads of the departments who are sitting with us today. I may call on any of these folks at any point in the meeting to talk about the details of any of the questions or the town's business. So thank you.
You want me to come up there?
You can do it right from your chair.
Great. All right, thank you. This is my first town meeting, so I'm going to do my best to try and get these things right. So if we have our select board members, I can't quite see who's down at the end, but I can see Bill Garrity over here, Peter Christie, Joanna Whitcomb, Athos Rossius, and Nancy Carter. And perhaps we could have all of the town staff that are here maybe stand up, and I'll introduce our department heads. So we have Laura Spector-Morgan, Town Attorney, Rob Hausman, Planning Director, John Sherman, Parks and Rec Director, Marty McMillan, Fire Chief, Pete Kalbaki, Public Works Director, Ellen Bullion, Finance Director, Norm Bernache, Assessing Director, Ruby Simon, the Director of HOW, Corey Stevens, IT Director, and Jeff Metzler, Aetna. And did I? Oh, sorry. So, and Doris Yates, yes, our community nurse. Thank you. And where is Carrie?
Carrie Osgood.
And where is Carrie Osgood? Yes, thank you, Carrie Osgood. And if we have any other staff here, could we also just get a, Christina Hall from Public Works. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Alex. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Christie, our Select Board Chair, to open the discussion on Article 8 by reading the article, moving the article in, and once we get a second, we'll have him make a few remarks about the substance of the article. Thank you.
So you thought I was going to sneak my budget presentation in early, didn't you? I nominate the following persons for the following offices. Advisory Board of Assessors for a term of 3 years, Joe Roberto. 3 fence viewers, each for a term of 1 year, Robert Grable, Matt Marshall, and Sarah Packham. 2 surveyors of the wood and timber, each for a term of 1 year, Robert Keene and James Kennedy.
Thank you. Do I have a second on Article 8? Second on Article 8 right here in the front of the bleachers. So the article has been seconded. And to open the discussion, Mr. Christie again, please.
Joe's has been on the, he was chair of the Advisory Board of Assessors for many, many years and is willing to continue on, which is wonderful. The others are honorary positions. I believe fence viewers are charged with disputing boundary disputes, which we haven't had one in 80 years. And the surveyors of woods and timber are to arbitrate someone bringing in less than a full cord of wood. And I don't think we've had one of those for 80 years. So these are honorary positions, and we appreciate these people for their past work with the town.
Okay, so having opened the debate on question 8, does anybody wish to speak on these important town offices? Having heard no debate on the issue, it seems like the matter is settled. Would you like to speak now or after? Okay. Mr. Christie has one more remark he'd like to make, and then we will move to the vote on question 8.
This past motion, we are honoring people who have done special work for the town. And I think it's important for us to recognize that this is Bill Garrity's last town meeting, and we'll be dropping off the select board. I didn't want to wait till the end of the meeting because I think it's going to be a long night. Bill has been my wingman for 11 plus years. He's been a calm, consistent, focused member of the board, brings special knowledge in the human resources area, and always able to cut through and ask the right questions. And for this, we greatly appreciate him and all the work he's put in for the town. When I talked to Bill about what might be an appropriate recognition, he said, "Oh, please, not a chair. Oh my God, not a clock. No pictures," because Bill is now downsizing. So if you need any of those things, Bill has plenty to go around. But we do have a gift certificate to cover some of Bill's lost golf balls during the summer. So please join me in recognizing Bill Garrity. Would you like to say anything? Would you like the mic? Would you enjoy the mic?
Yeah. Just a couple comments. Kathy and I moved here 37 years ago. We thought it was a special place, and we were right. We raised our children here, and I've been involved in a lot of different organizations throughout, besides getting paid for some work. And I've watched this group here, the staff, all the volunteers on all the committees and stuff, and that, again, it emphasizes why this is a special place. And I also like to congratulate the leadership team that you just met. They're way above average, and I think there should be quite recognition for that. The select board has been a joy to work with, and as a member of a board, anyone who's been on a board, you know there's a lot of work and commitment, but if you're the chair of the board, there's significantly a lot more bigger commitment. And I want to thank Peter for all the years as a member of the board and all the years as a chair. You've organized a civil, constructive discussion format, which I think some of us recognize. Not every town has accomplished that. And I want to thank you personally for all your leadership.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So I'm going to call the question on Article 8. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. The motion carries. Article 8 carries. The next three articles, Articles 9, 10, and 11, are bond articles. So the town will be voting on whether to incur debt through a bond for various different items, which the select board will present, and then we'll have an opportunity to discuss. Because the state law requires us to provide to the town meeting an opportunity to vote on these bond articles privately with a ballot, we have included in your packet three distinct voting chits. So there's a blue one for Article 9, and a gray one for Article 10, and a yellow one for Article 11. And state law requires us to provide you 1 hour after we introduce the motions and open the voting for you to come down, deliberate, think about things, and cast your vote in a ballot box. So what I'd like to do in order to make it as efficient as possible for people is to introduce and discuss each of the articles one by one, so 9, and then 10, and then 11, and then we will have one period of voting when you will vote on all three articles. Does that make sense? Okay. And just remember to match the color on your chit with the color on the box, and it should go just fine. So to introduce Article number 9, to move it into debate, Nancy Carter.
And I want to give a general all-purpose I'm sorry, because there is a lot of verbiage with these, and I would certainly eliminate it if it were up to me, but it's not. Giving a smile to our lawyer. So bear with me for the repetition in each article. I can't help it. My thoughts are with you. I move. This is now Article 9, folks. And any of you who want to read along, of course, all of this is in your... Oh, yes. Peter Kubacki is pointing to the screen. A couple of voters came up to me as we were getting ready saying, I can't possibly read that screen. Peter, thank you very much for that work. I appreciate it. And it's all in here. Okay? Article 9. I move that the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $22 million for the purpose of funding a wastewater treatment facility proposed capital project, and to authorize $22 million, such sum to be raised through the issuance of bonds or notes under and in compliance with the provisions of the Municipal Finance Act, RSA 33, as amended, to authorize the Select Board to apply for, obtain, and accept federal, state, or other aid, gifts, and donations, if any, which may be available for said project, and to comply with all laws applicable to said project, to authorize the Select Board to issue, negotiate, sell, and deliver such bonds or notes, and to determine the rate of the interest thereon, and the maturity and other terms therefore, to authorize the Select Board to take any other action necessary to carry out this vote or to pass any other vote relative thereto, without impairing the general obligation nature of bonds and/or notes issued to finance the project, it is in the intention of the Select Board that debt service payments shall be made from wastewater fees. This action shall be written yes or no ballots. Polls shall remain open and ballots shall be accepted by the moderator for a period of not less than 1 hour following the completion of the discussion of this article. 3/5 ballot vote are required to pass.
Thank you. Do I have a second on Article 9? I have a second here in the second row. Opening debate on Article 9. Would you like to speak on Article 9, Nancy? Okay. Anybody have comment, opinion, thought on Article 9? Kari?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name's Kari Asmus, and I'm going to lower this because I'm not that tall. I'm chair of the Hanover Finance Committee. Due to the length of tonight's warrant, I will forego my normal preamble explaining why it is my role to opine on sundry warrant articles and simply recognize the members of the committee who I ask to please stand for a moment. I know not everybody is here, but Carrie is here, Herschel is here. So if you could just stand. All of our meetings are open to the public, but we like for people to know who we are in the event that you have thoughts to share or questions to ask. I would also like to take a moment to thank our Select Board member, Bill Garrity in particular, and at-large member Matt Gardner, who are both stepping down. If anyone here tonight is interested in filling a vacancy on the Finance Committee, as we may have two, depending on the outcome of the vote for Select Board, I would ask that they forward a letter of interest and short resume to you, Mr. Moderator, Jeremy Eggleton, as you, together with the school district moderator, appoint our memberships. So now on to the opining.
And my email for any communication of any nature is moderator@hanovernh.org.
Thank you. I didn't actually have that. That's great. So during a public meeting on April 17th, the Hanover Finance Committee voted unanimously to support the wastewater facility bond in the amount of $22 million, and, spoiler alert, the $7.8 million bond for the water distribution in the next warrant article. We reviewed the proposed payment schedules for these bonds or notes, both individually and combined, to discern the overall impact to ratepayers and deem them reasonable, in large part because the payments would start after the payments for the current bonds will end. It is also fortuitous that our neighbors in Lebanon, who are also wastewater subscribers, will contribute to the costs of the project, as will those in rural Hanover who have private septic systems, as tipping fees are expected to increase. So if you happen to have a private system, you know, beat the upcoming increase. In addition to procuring the grants that are currently available, the Finance Committee encourages the Select Board to make note of the $1 million plus available in the wastewater undesignated fund balance that has been set aside for capital improvements, such as this, as the monies could serve as additional offset. We would also like to see reports on principal and interest payments in future statements included in the annual report. Overall, the Finance Committee believes these are necessary and desirable upgrades to our wastewater and water systems and support their passage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any further comment, opinion, thinking? Yes, sir. Please come down. And if you don't mind, please state your name and spell your last name for the record. And state your address, if you don't mind.
Hi, John Ruth, Carriage Lane in Hanover, New Hampshire. I had a question, might be a question for the lawyer. It says without impairing the general obligation. So these are general obligation, not revenue notes. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so the town of Hanover is obligated regardless of whether or not they're on the sewer system. So as someone that has a septic, I could be on the hook for the repayment of these bonds. Is that legally correct?
That is legally correct.
Thank you. And the same is true for the next article as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comment, opinion, thinking that the body should consider? Okay, before I call the question, I will consider debate closed on Article number 9, and I will introduce Nancy Carter to move Article 10 into debate.
Jeremy asked if I had anything to say on this. The reason I nodded in the negative is that there are very good descriptions of each one of these in your green pages. And now if you're following along in rapt attention, it's page 36. So those are pretty well spelled out. And we're now going on to the gray one. So this is Article 10. I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $7,800,000 for the purpose of funding a water distribution plan and to authorize $7,800,000 to be raised through the issuance of bonds or notes under and in compliance with provisions of the Municipal Finance Act, RSA 33, as amended. To authorize the Select Board to apply for, obtain, and accept federal, state, or other aid, gifts, and donations, if any, which may be available for said project, and to comply with all laws applicable to said project, to authorize the Select Board to issue, negotiate, sell, and deliver such bonds or notes, and to determine the rate of interest thereon, and the maturity and other items thereto, and to authorize the Select Board to take any other action necessary to carry out this vote or to pass any other vote relative thereto, without impairing the general obligation nature of bonds and or notes issued to finance the project. It is the intention of the Select Board that debt service payments shall be made from water fees. This action shall be written yes/no ballot. Polls shall remain open and ballots shall be accepted by the moderator for a period of not less than 1 hour following the completion of discussion of this article. 3/5 ballot vote is required to pass.
Thank you. Do I have a second? I see a second. Mid-high bleachers. Thank you. Is there any debate on Article 10? Article 10. Any debate, comment, question? We've already heard from the Finance Committee Chair. Any? Yes, ma'am. Yep. Go ahead. Yeah, you should come down because people can't hear you unless you speak into the microphone. Thank you. And please state your name and your address.
Hi, Sarah Lord, 108 Brook Hollow in Hanover. I just had a question. Is there a sense of how long the new water distribution system and the new water reclamation system will last? Is there a projection on that?
Is that a question for you? Or? Yep. Peter, if you don't mind stepping up and to the microphone and making that explanation.
Pete Klobacki, the Director of Public Works. We'll start with the water system. The water main will last about 100 years. So whatever we replace in the water main, about 100 years. The wastewater upgrades, there's part of them that'll last upwards of 50 years. There's equipment that'll last 25 years roughly. So in the 25 year to 50 year for the wastewater. Tankage will last 70 to 80 years. So quite a long time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further debate, comment, question of any kind on Article 10? Okay, I will. Are you coming down, Mr. Ruth? Yeah.
Sorry, you guys already know me. I should have probably stayed closer. I'm just really struggling with the revenue bond versus obligation bond. That I don't understand why the people that are not on the sewer should be held liable for sewer infrastructure that's never going to serve my house. Why did the Select Board, I'm really curious why the town is going that path, the general obligation bond versus a revenue bond.
I'm going to pass that.
In my experience, revenue bonds have become almost impossible to get. So in New Hampshire, for towns, almost every bond I see that's issued is a general obligation bond. Of course, the intent here is to repay those bonds from the appropriate sources.
Okay. Well, there's always good intent, but there's still legally, it could just become part of the tax bill to every taxpayer in the town.
Yes, it could.
So,
Go ahead and address your question to me, and then we'll distribute it. Is there
okay.
a follow-up
I mean,
to that, or?
Yeah, it's just, I really struggled because it was always kind of, in everything I saw leading up to this, it was phrased as a revenue bond. And now I find out at town meeting it's a general obligation. So it's a little frustrating that it was kind of misportrayed that way.
In terms of the debate that you heard about the
In
issue?
terms of the things that I've seen coming through the mail, that it always seems like it was like, oh, this is going to be paid for by fees from the town's water and sewer, but and while that might be the intent, it's not actually what's in the bond documents, which is misleading.
Okay. Other than the sort of logistical challenges of obtaining such a bond, is there a policy response from the board on that issue? The question being essentially, why is this not a revenue bond? Why is it a general obligation of the town, and what the policy thinking of the select board might be on that particular question?
Help me if I'm wrong, but my memory is that almost all of our bonds are general bonds. I don't ever remember any document describing them differently, but I could be wrong. So it's a general obligation. It's clearly intent. We've been doing it for many, many years. These are paid for by the users of the water and of the treatment plant. So you were correct. You are correct. It's a general obligation, but it's been our history and practice to they be paid for by the ratepayers.
Okay, I guess I just struggle to see why we should repeat a past mistake for those of us that do not have town water and sewer.
Thank you.
So I'll follow up on that with, I guess, a question. My name is Rich Howarth, and I live at Hanover Center on Sawsville Road. It says that it's the intention of the select board that debt service payments shall be made, but the select board doesn't decide the budget. Town meeting and the town decide the budget. And is this an amendable motion? And could an amendment state that it is the intent of the town meeting that the debt service payments shall be made, which might in fact be binding on the town going forward?
This is an amendable motion, so I could take a motion to amend. If the language is provided, we'll put it up on the screen and then have a debate on the amendment.
I would offer an amendment that it is the intention of town meeting that debt service payments shall be made. So I would substitute the word of town meeting for of the select board.
Okay, Alex is going to ideally.
Wait, I'm
In both articles, right? In 9 and 10.
let me make the motion, and then we'll come back to what Mr. Ecker is suggesting, because he's saying that this might apply to both articles, which maybe we should think about. And I'm trying to be constructive here, so.
Yeah, I understand. We've technically closed debate on Article 9.
I understand that, yeah.
And so I'd have to reopen it, which we can definitely do with a motion. But first, I would like to take the motion on Article 10, the motion to amend. And so please provide us the language again. Can you get this?
Yeah, I would go to where it says the intention of the select board. I would simply say the intent of the town, or of town meeting. Why don't we say of town meeting? The intention of town meeting. Yeah.
And Alex, would it be possible to, yes, exactly, increase the size of that font? I know it's small for the folks in back, but we're going to do our best to keep it on one page. Okay, there's a motion on the floor to amend Article 10 to substitute the words town meeting for the select board. Do I have a second? There's a second up in the upper right, thank you, of the gallery. Do I have comments, thoughts, questions, or debate on the proposed amendment?
With all due respect, changing the word intent doesn't matter who it's from. You'd need to change getting away from the general obligation, and I'll defer to the lawyer here, but you'd have to change it from general obligation to payable solely from fees.
Okay, so that's a different amendment.
Well,
Hold on.
yeah, I
And-
don't know if you'd want to change it, but it doesn't, changing the word intent and who it's.
I understand. So here's how we're going to handle it. So there's been a motion and a second. You absolutely can propose that as an amendment, and we'll consider that after we vote on this amendment. Is that okay? Okay. So there's a motion on the floor that's been seconded to substitute town meeting for the select board in Article 10. Any further comment, thought, observation? Yes, sir, in the left gallery.
My name is Tom Toma. I live on Rip Road. Just a question that's outside of my bailiwick. Is town meeting an entity?
Town meeting is an entity. The town meeting, if I may, Laura, the town meeting is the legislative body of the town of Hanover. So you are. Further comment, thought, opinion on the motion to amend Article 10 to substitute town meeting for the select board in the language? No further debate. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Nay. Okay, the motion does not carry. The article remains as written in the warrant. Now, Mr. Ruth, do you want to offer a proposed amendment?
I would like to offer a proposed amendment. I'd kind of probably lean on the bond counsel a little bit to help make sure this is right. But it would be striking without the phrase without impairing the general obligation nature of the bonds, and somewhere in there it should be said to payable solely from the kind of applicable fees. I think it's water and sewer fees, with the idea of taking away the general obligation structure of the bonds.
So as I read Article 10,
so you'll need to take out without the phrase without impairing the general obligation nature of the bonds, because that is actually exactly what I would propose is to make them revenue bonds, not general obligation bonds.
so it seems to me, if I may, if you were to amend Article 10 by striking the words without impairing through the words select board that and capitalized debt service payments, that would affect your
Whoever's got the
intention.
keyboard just struck way too much. So, I'm sorry, it was like striking without.
So we would strike from that sentence, everything except debt service payments shall be made from water fees with a capital D.
Solely from water.
So you would like to amend that sentence to simply read, debt service payments shall be made solely from water fees.
From water fees, and strike, and then it would be striking the without.
Right. I think we got that. So if we strike everything up to the word debt, capitalize debt, and then add solely, shall be made solely from water fees. Is that your intention?
So you could say solely from water and other user fees. It kind of gives, I guess, a little more flexibility. But the intent being that there'll be revenue bonds not tied to the general obligation bonds.
Okay.
So I guess, does that fulfill that objective?
It sounds like you want to say water and other user fees. So go ahead and add that in, Alex. So the sentence now reads, debt service payments shall be made from water and other user fees. Does that make sense?
solely from water.
Solely from water and other user fees. Thank
Right.
you.
Like, as in, it shouldn't be coming out of reserve, you know, it shouldn't be coming out of kind of,
I believe that would affect your intention from my perspective.
I'm sorry, say that again.
It sounds like we've affected what you intend to accomplish here.
So there you go. That would be the amendment I.
Laura agrees. So that would be the proposed amendment on the table. Do I have a second for Mr. Ruth's amendment? Here we go, in the top rear. A voice cries in the wilderness. We now have a second. Do I have comment?
Yes.
Please
My
state your
name-
name and your
Yep.
address. Yep.
My name's Deb Nelson, and I live in Hanover. And I would just like to remind the community of a conversation many years ago about sidewalk fees and who walks on them and who doesn't, and who uses the toilets at the Ray School and the high school and the Richmond School, including tonight. We're talking about a community. Can we please just move on and stop with the amendments for people who have septic systems and their own plan, and just do things for the good of the community, and recognize that our select board and our town have consistently done bonds and done this, and we've paid our bills, and it's all been fine. But I just feel like this is heading us down a hole, an ugly one. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comment, opinion on the proposed amendment as described? Mr. Acker.
Thank you. Jeff Acker, Greensboro Road. I'm just curious if anybody could tell us what the interest rate would be. I know we're not borrowing the money till 2029, but if we were borrowing it today, what would the interest rate be on a general obligation bond, and what would the interest rate be on a revenue bond? And how much is the debt service on $30 million?
I'm going to ask Alex for that, or at least to designate somebody who might provide that information.
I don't know the difference between general obligation and revenue off the top, but the interest rates that we were looking at were in the 2 to 3% range. Is that about right? 2.56%, but that's currently. And those were general obligation bonds.
That's what we'd go into agreement with, would be the 2.56.
And that, so the 2.56% would be what we would obligate ourselves to for the debt service payments. If it were a general obligation bond revenue, we don't have that number.
Okay, thank you. Further comment, officials?
Thank you, Christina.
I'm Bill Fischel. I want to second Deb Nelson's comment, but I also want to ask, almost rhetorically, has the town ever failed to pay obligations out of revenue, even when they are general obligations? Can anybody on the select board say? I see Joanna shaking her head.
I've only been in service for 9 years, so.
Joanna said, I've only been here in service for 9 years. Speak into the microphone if you could. Thank you. Anyone else care to offer a thought on whether Hanover has ever failed or defaulted on its bond obligations from revenue sources? Kari?
Yes, so Kari Asmus of the Finance Committee, and again, we do keep track of payment schedules, and our understanding from what we have tracked that things that are coming from the general fund, such as the bond on the community center, that those are paid out of taxation, but the bonds that are associated with either the water or the wastewater funds have come exclusively from user fees. In my time on the Finance Committee, the payment schedules that we reviewed for the two proposed bonds showed what would happen to the user fees, the rate fees. And when we combined the two, it looked like over the next 10 years that for the average ratepayer, which perhaps I can be reminded, it's a family of 4 who uses 185 gallons per day or something like that, that over the next 10 years, due to these bonds, that the rates for them would increase by $40. for $0. So that was really one of the things that was compelling to the Finance Committee about whether or not this was a reasonable proposal, and that would be able to be assumed by ratepayers over that period of time.
Thank you. And I do want to add a brief clarification. I think I summarized Mr. Fischel's comment inaccurately. I think, if I may, you asked the board if the town had ever failed to pay its general debt obligations out of its revenue stream for a particular purpose. Is that correct? Meaning you had asked if the town, on an issue like sewer fees, paying for capital infrastructure, if we had ever had to resort to general funds as opposed to using fees. Is that correct? And the answer there was not to our knowledge, according to Ms. Whitcomb. So, thank you. Okay, further comment on the proposed amendment to Article 10. Thank you. So the question on the table right now is whether to approve the amendment. Yay will amend the article. Nay will retain the article as originally drafted. So all in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Nay. Okay, so the motion to amend does not carry. So we are back to the original article as drafted in your warrant, which is in front of you. Is there any further comment, question, or opinion on Article 10 as drafted? Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to close debate on question 10. We will reserve voting until after question 11. To introduce question 11, once again, Ms. Carter.
Elated with all of the repetition verbiage, I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $1,200,000 for the purpose of funding the purchase of a fire engine, and to authorize $1,200,000 to be raised through the issuance of bonds or notes under and in compliance with the provisions of the Municipal Finance Act, RSA 33, as amended, to authorize the Select Board to apply for, obtain, and accept federal, state, or other aid, gifts, and donations, if any, which may be available for said project, and to comply with all laws applicable to said project, to authorize the Select Board to issue, negotiate, sell, and deliver such bonds or notes, and to determine the rate of interest thereon, the maturity and other terms thereof, and to authorize the Select Board to take any other action necessary to carry out this vote or pass any other vote relative thereto. This action shall be written in a yes/no ballot. The polls shall remain open, and the ballots shall be accepted by the moderator for a period of not less than 1 hour following the completion of the discussion of this article. 3/5 ballot vote are required to pass. And may I point out in your green pages, this is page 37. And by the way, this is a pumper truck. Those of you think that that's a lot of money. It's not even a ladder truck, but that is what fire engines cost these days. And the reason that we're getting it now is that we save approximately $250,000 by putting our request to purchase in now. There is...
We haven't seconded the motion.
Oh, I apologize.
So we have a second here in the front row. Thank you. You may proceed.
I'm going right into discussion phase, so excited about fire engines. And so the company that creates these engines has a backlog, about a 2-year wait list. So we need to get our request in. Not many people build these trucks. Our fleet averages, Chief has told me, about 21 years, that every 7 years we get a new truck. And so we have a fleet that serves us well, but is not extravagant. And we actually have a fleet that is smaller than when many of us first arrived on the Select Board, because our mutual aid services Hanover, Hartford, Lebanon, and some volunteer firefighters in the area, is all working so well, this mutual aid, that we have actually been able to cut back on the amount of equipment because we have access to other towns' equipment. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have further comment, opinion, questions, or debate on Article 11, starting with the Finance Committee? Kari?
Thank you again, Mr. Moderator. The Finance Committee voted unanimously to support the replacement of engine number 4 through the issuance of a $1.2 million bond. The need and advantages of ordering the engine now are understood, and as we reviewed what we calculated would be a repayment schedule, we could readily see that relief bonding, we could see the relief bonding brings to the fire fund budget when compared to continuing to make capital reserve deposits that would otherwise be necessary. We do note, however, that when payments on the bond begin in fiscal year 23, that will require at that time additional taxation, as no other offsets are anticipated.
Any further comment, question, opinion on Article 11 concerning the fire truck? Okay, thank you. So I'm going to close the debate on Article 11, and here's what we're going to do. Remember, sewer is blue, water distribution is gray, fire truck is yellow. There's a box with each of those colors down front. My motion, I will take a motion from the floor to enter into the 1 hour voting period on Articles 9 through 10, and to pause deliberation on following articles for 15 minutes to give people an initial chance to vote without having to miss any debate on subsequent articles. How's that for a motion? And we have a second. Very nice. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. Voters may now come down and vote on Articles 9 through 11. Remember, blue is the sewer system, gray is the water, yellow is the fire truck. Tear them or circle them. Tear them in half, put in your vote, or circle the one that you want, either one. 9, 10, and 11. Blue, gray, yellow. You don't have blue, gray, or yellow?
I got ripped off, man.
I'm sorry. We're going to have to handle that. That's all right.
Well,
Democracy.
Woodstock is where we go. Yeah, we used to.
It's only certain kinds of questions are on the vote casting ballot. You have to do these kinds of questions at town meeting, at the business meeting, per state law. Probably couple it with the announcement for these votes.
next year.
I'm going to give folks another 2 or 3 minutes to cast those ballots, and otherwise make your way back to your seats. Thank you, everybody, bringing the meeting back to order. I appreciate it. Those polls will remain open for 1 hour. We began that vote at 7:52 p.m. So at 8:52, we will close the polls on those 3 bond articles and count the votes, and then we will let you know what the results are. Thank you. With respect to Article 12, I'd like to introduce Mr. Garrity to move the question.
Good evening. I move to see if the town will vote to adopt the provisions of RSA 72:28, Standard and Optional Veterans Tax Credit. If adopted, the credit will apply to every resident of the state who and any person who is a veteran as defined in RSA 21:50 and served not less than 90 days on active service in the armed forces of the United States in any qualifying war or armed conflict listed in this section and continues to serve or was honorably discharged, or an officer who continues to serve or was honorably separated from service, or the spouse or surviving spouse of such resident, provided that training for active duty by a member of the National Guard or Reserve shall be included as service under this subparagraph. B, every resident of this state who was terminated from armed forces because of service-connected disability or surviving spouse of such resident, and C, the surviving spouse of any resident who suffered a service-connected death. If adopted, this credit granted will be $500, which is the amount adopted by the town in 2012. This article is required because the legislature expanded the eligibility criteria for this credit to include individuals who have not yet been discharged from service in the armed forces. The Select Board voted 5-0 to support this article.
Thank you. Do I have a second on Article 12? I have a second here in the front row, second row. Thank you very much. Any comment? Before we take comment from the crowd, Mr. Garrity.
Yeah, this is just a requirement, change of legislation. It's the same amount of money. We just support to continue what we've been doing for the last several years.
Thank you. Any further opinion, comment, questions regarding Article 12? Mr. Fischel.
I'm Bill Fischel. I'm eligible for this. I've never taken it because I think exemptions from property taxes should be based on need or dire distress. Most people eligible for this, I think, can pay their taxes. I can pay my taxes, so I don't take it even though I'm eligible. I think the original proposal back in 2012 to make it $100, a sign of the town's esteem for veterans, is sufficient. So I would move that we substitute $100 for $500 in this motion.
So there is a motion on the table to amend Article 12 to substitute $100 for the figure $500. Otherwise, the text remains the same. Alex? Do I have a second on the motion? There is a second on the motion. There it is in writing, everybody. Thank you. So the proposal is a motion to amend Article 12 by substituting $500 for $100. Excuse me, 500, substituting for the figure $500, $100. Thank you. Any further debate, discussion, comment, or opinion on the proposed motion to amend? Yes, sir. Mr. Acker.
Jeff Acker, Greensboro Road. And Mr. Fischel, I appreciate your service, and I appreciate that you can afford to pay your taxes, but I think it's presumptuous of you to assume that everybody else can. So this is clearly a voluntary credit that you can decide to take or not take, but for us as a body to assume that everybody in here can afford not to take the $500 credit that the legislature authorizes, I think is incredibly presumptuous. So those of us who can afford to pay, those of you who can't afford to pay, don't take the credit. By all means, we appreciate the donation. But there are some of us probably who need it, and I don't think it's up to us to take it away from them. So I am opposed to that amendment.
Thank you. Further comment, debate, questions, opinion on the proposed amendment to Article 12? Sir. Matt Stover.
Howdy, Matt Stover. Thanks for the donation, Bill. I also can take the credit, haven't taken it yet, but I think just benchmarking the $100 relative to most of the other towns in New Hampshire would make us seem pretty miserly for probably one of the richest towns in New Hampshire against veterans. So I think it probably sends a pretty bad message. So I'm also opposed to the amendment.
Thank you. Any further comment, opinion, or question regarding the proposed amendment to Article 12? There being no further debate on the question before the body right now is whether to amend Article 12 to substitute for the $500 figure the figure of $100. All in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. Nay. The motion does not carry. Thank you. So the original proposal will be as set forth in the writing for Article 12. Any further comment, opinion, debate on Article 12 as drafted and noticed? There being no further debate, I will call the question. All in favor of Article 12 say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Article 12 carries. Thank you. To introduce Article 13, Mr. Garrity.
Article 13, I move to see the town will vote to re-adopt the provisions of RSA 72:62, an exemption from the assessed value for property tax purposes for a person owning real property which is equipped with a solar energy system as defined in RSA 72:61. Such solar property tax exemption shall be in the amount equal to 100% of the assessed value of qualifying equipment as defined in RSA 72:61, and as may be amended, but not until such equipment is demonstrated to add to the value of the real property based on the determination of the town assessor. This readoption is required because in 2020, the legislature voted to expand the definition of solar energy system to include systems which utilize solar energy to produce electricity for building, including all photogenic inverters and storage. Such systems may be off-grid or connected to the grid in a net metered or group net metered arrangement pursuant to RSA 362-A:9, or in a direct retail sale arrangement pursuant to RSA 362-A:2-A. The Select Board voted 5-0 to support this motion.
I have a second on Article 13. So seconded here in the front of the upper left gallery. Further comment? No further comment from Mr. Garrity. Any further opinion? Yes, ma'am. State your name, please, and your address, if you don't mind.
I'm Deborah Olson from 163 Greensboro. My question is this. I live in a condo, and we investigated the possibility of putting solar on the roof of our condo. And one of the problems that came up was apparently we as owners, as condo members, would not be able to take a tax deduction. And I'm just wondering if anybody can explain to me why that is, and how that, if there's any way to do something about that with this.
You pose wonderful legal questions, ma'am. We do have Norm here in the front row.
I
Please.
assume you're talking about a federal tax deduction? Or, because right now we don't assess the value of the solar anyways. So it wouldn't be assessed, and under this provision, if you did have solar, it wouldn't be assessed. It would have zero assessment. So I think you're talking about a federal tax credit.
Okay. So that's nothing. Thank you.
Okay, further debate, question, or opinion on Article 13. There being no further debate, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of Article 13 say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. The motion carries. Article 13 carries. To introduce Article 14, Ms. Whitcomb.
Hello. I move that the town vote to adopt RSA 41:14-A to allow the select board to acquire or sell land, buildings, or both, provided, however, they shall first submit any such proposed acquisition or sale to the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission for review, 2 public hearings, and recommendation by those bodies as required by RSA 41:14-A. This article will remain in effect until rescinded by a majority vote.
Before you discuss further, can I have a second on Article 14, please, Kari? Are you here to debate or second?
Well,
okay, Kari seconds, and then Ms. Whitcomb has some words, and then Kari will speak.
Thanks, Kari. I just wanted to say this is a pretty common tool throughout the state of New Hampshire. 110 towns have already adopted this, and it basically enables the town to more efficiently or effectively navigate the possibility of developing housing or conservation land, doing economic development or community uses, by allowing us to act, the select board, after due process, the public hearing, meeting with the planning board and the Conservation Commission, to take action beyond just a town meeting. So, did I get that right? Okay. And if you want further information, it's on page 38 in the Green Book.
Could I just add one other thing? It does not authorize the selectmen to raise any additional funds. If they're going to use this to purchase property, they have to be able to find the money in the existing budget. So this is just the authority to purchase the property with money they have. It's not to raise additional taxes.
And it also allows us to act on easements after the process.
Kari?
So Kari Asmus, I'm just speaking as an individual, and I live in between Etna and Hanover Center. I wanted to comment that when this article first appeared in the select board packet, the wording was different, and that night the language that was approved, and I know that we sort of had some tentative language, and I'm not talking about that, but originally it read, to see if the town will vote to adopt RSA 41:14-A to allow the select board to acquire or sell land, buildings, or both, provided, however, that they shall first submit any such proposed acquisition or sale to the planning board and the Conservation Commission for review and recommendation by those bodies, and hold and hold the mandated 2 public hearings required by RSA, et cetera. So the way that it appeared that night and what was voted on by the select board, that it was clear that the 2 mandated hearings were not necessarily ones that are going to be held by the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board. So I'm just wondering, given that the language that's in the annual report is not the same language that was in front of the select board, I'm wondering if we want to amend it so that the wording actually makes a little more sense for starters.
So I think obviously that's are you proposing to make that amendment?
I would, I don't know if the wording is available from that packet, but basically it said provided, however, that they, okay, well, I'll read it from here. Provided that they shall first submit any such proposed acquisition or sale to the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission for review, so that's the same. And then this is where things start to get moved around a little bit. And it says, so review and recommendation by those boards and hold the mandated, and then we continue with the 2 public hearings. Yeah, so recommendation by those boards and hold the mandated 2 public hearings. And then you would go, you take out the semicolon. That's after mandated, in red, it has a semicolon, so you would take that out.
It's just a comma.
Oh, I see, it's a comma. Okay, and then it would be the, yes, and recommendation of those bodies would be deleted. And then that is the wording that was in front of the select board and at the pre-town meeting, and that was adopted by them.
Okay, so the motion is on the floor to amend the article as set forth here in writing, so that the sentence reads, and the Conservation Commission for review and recommendation by those boards and hold the mandated 2 public hearings, striking the rest of the sentence as required by RSA 4114-A. Do I have a second? So seconded. Before I move into public comment on this, I'm wondering, the language appears similar to me. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the amendment.
I like that. It's much more clear. I was having a little trouble reading it, so thank you.
So we have a third to that amendment. Does anybody have thoughts, opinions, comment on the proposed amendment to Article 14? Yes, Mr. Acker.
Just a question, Jeff Acker from Greensboro Road. Recommendation by those boards, does the select board have to take the board's recommendation? Because the town meeting or the town, whatever this thing is called, report, says something about and I just had it and now I can't find it, but it says something about the approval of the planning board. Here it is. The RSA mandates a public process that requires the review and approval of the Planning Board and Conservation Commission, 2 noticed public hearings, and blah, blah, blah. So that's on the top of page 38, the approval, and that's very different than the recommendation. So I'm wondering what the law actually says before we vote on something that the law doesn't say.
Understood. So
maybe I'll offer an amendment.
A procedural point. So there is obviously the recommended language occurs in both versions. So I'll take your comment as a general comment on the recommended version. We'll address it, but we will then decide on the amendment and then move to discussion about the question that ultimately is produced. But in answering the question about what the statute says on this subject, I will call on Laura Spector-Morgan.
The statute says for review and recommendation. It is not a binding recommendation.
And this is 4114-A? Okay. So people can look that up, represented by counsel, that the statute says Statute 4114A states recommended. So the question before the the body right now is whether to amend Article 14 as proposed by the motion to amend and as set forth here on the writing, and supported by Joanna Whitcomb anyway. Further opinion, comment, or question on the proposed amendment? There being no further comment, I will move the question, which is, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. None opposed. So the question is now amended as set forth here, Article 14. And may I have Kari, since you proposed the amendment, please read the revised Article 14 for the body so we can hear it in its current final format.
Yes, to see if the town will vote to adopt RSA 41:14-A to allow the select board to acquire or sell land, buildings, or both, provided, however, they shall first submit any such proposed acquisition or sale to the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission for review and recommendation by those boards, and hold the mandated 2 public hearings as required by RSA 41:14-A. This article will remain in effect until rescinded by a majority vote.
Thank you. Any further comment, question, or debate on the revised amended article? Oh, yes. Oh, no, we have a second on it. It's been decided.
So I had something else, but I believe I would yield to Mr. Acker since I talk so much.
So I guess I would like to propose an amendment that we change the word recommendation to approval, so that what we're voting on matches what we were told in the town report we would be voting on. And I also just have to say that I think if we're going to, as a legislative body that Jeremy told us we are, if we're going to delegate our legislative authority, we ought to at least delegate it as broadly as we can. And I, for one, would find that if a planning board, a conservation commission, and a select board all voted in favor of some land transaction, that's probably good enough. But that giving all that authority to just the select board, to me, seems very, very unwise. So my amendment is that we strike the word recommendation and replace it with the word approval.
So, Alex, can you please? Yes. We did vote on the first amendment. It passed. The amendment passed, so the question now before the body was whether we would proceed to vote on the substance of the amended Article 14, and now Mr. Acker has asked for a subsequent amendment. So the amendment, Jeff?
Just replace recommendation with approval.
Okay, we're going to get the amendment up there, and then we're going to talk about it. So, approve, substituting for recommended. Thank you. And to open comment on the proposed amendment, Ms. Whitcomb.
I just wanted to clarify, if you could turn to page 38, I think what, Jeff, you're referring to in our explanation of this amendment, it reads, the RSA mandates a public process that requires the review and approval of the Planning Board and Conservation Commission to notice public hearings and the ability for 50 voters by petition to add the decision to the Select Board, add the decision the Select Board is considering to a warrant article at the next town meeting. So I think that's a little bit of the nuance here, that how we're explaining it is, if the Planning Board wants to put this to a public meeting, to the town meeting, it goes to the town meeting. If 50 voters want this to go to town meeting instead of this process, it goes to town meeting. So there's kind of an out. Is that right, Laura?
Well, the planning board can't send it to town meeting, but if 50 voters petition, that would send it to town meeting.
Okay, so any further comment, opinion, or questions on the proposed amendment to Article 14 to replace recommendation with approval? Yes. Mr. Asias.
Am I on? Mr. Moderator, I would just like to ask our council one more time what the statute reads and what are the consequences of enacting a proposal that is not in accordance with the statute.
Question for council as to what the statute reads and what the consequences would be of enacting a proposal that is at odds with the statute.
The statute reads recommendation, but I don't know of any reason why town meeting couldn't make the process more difficult than the statute lays out by requiring the approval.
Thank you. Any further comment, question, or opinion on the proposed amendment to modify the amended Article 14? Mr. Fischel.
Bill Fischel again. I actually have some problem with giving the same powers to the planning board as to the select board. The select board is elected. The planning board is appointed more or less by volunteers. And so I just have some qualms about that.
So do I understand your comment to be that the proposed replacement would confer powers on the planning board that should belong with the select board?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Further comment, question, or opinion on the proposed amendment to Article 14? So the question before the body is whether to agree to the proposed amendment to Article 14. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Nay. The motion to amend does not carry. So we are back to the original amended version, which only includes recommendation and not approval. We do not need a second on that at this time. Any further comment on Article 14 as amended? There being no further comment, I will call the question. All in favor of Article 14 as amended, say aye. All opposed, say nay. The motion carries. Article 14 carries. The next item on the agenda is Article 15. Ms. Whitcomb.
I move that the town vote to authorize the conveyance of tax map 1, lot 11-2, 5 acres of the 265-acre former Levitt property located on the north side of Greensboro Road, acquired by the town in 2020 to Twin Pines Trust or another nonprofit organization to be developed as workforce housing on such terms and conditions as the select board may negotiate.
Thank you. Do I have a second on Article 15? So seconded. Further comment from the select board?
I just want to say that this, as most of you or many of you may recall, back in 2020 when we were in the parking lot, I think at Dewey Field, the town voted to create the, let's see if I can get this right, the Mink Brook Community Forest. And at that time, we voted to acquire 265 acres of land on Greensboro Road. And at the time, we didn't have the land surveyed. And so in the warrant that we approved, it was approximately 4 acres would be developed into workforce housing, and that we would come back to the voters, which is what we're doing right now. But I just wanted to let you know that there was 1 acre and a house, the original farmhouse on the property, and that was sold to help offset the cost of acquiring this property. 157.86 acres on the north side of Greensboro Road, kind of the wooded area, was conserved. On the south side of Greensboro Road, about 95 acres, do I have this right? The field was conserved. We've allocated 5.06, which is the vote, 5.06 acres carved out for workforce housing. And then there was roughly a quarter acre, 12,100 square feet carved out for a water tower replacement. So that's how it shook out in 2020, and so we're here just as a follow-up to put that land into workforce housing. You're next, okay.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second on Article 15. We have some opening comments from the Select Board. Any further opinion, comment, or questions concerning Article 15? Ma'am. Please state your name and your address.
I'm Joanne Conroy. I live at 5 North Park Street in Hanover, and I'm also the president and CEO of Dartmouth Health. Thank you for allowing me to stand up because those bleachers are really hard. So, you know, I've lived here for almost 6 years, and we used to joke about our housing crisis. You know, it's actually become a crisis. It's not a joke anymore. Every single week, we have people that we have extended offers to at the hospital. Nurses, technicians, even physicians that call before they have formally signed the agreement and have said they cannot find housing, so they're going to take a job somewhere else. This workforce housing is just one important step to actually bringing people into the community that are going to deliver the services that we need. They are your paramedics that work in the community. They are our pharmacists and our pharmacy techs that dispense your medications. They are your medical assistants and LNAs that work in your homes as you age in place. These are the services we all want and need. And yet, across the community now, we are not alone. Every single service provider is struggling to find people that will come to our community. Rural healthcare recruiting and rural recruiting has always been difficult. It's never been as difficult as it is right now. So I am, as a citizen, completely in support of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next comment here in the front row.
Clay Adams, 6 Clement Road. I'm speaking tonight as a citizen, but also the president and CEO of Mascoma Bank. In my day job, I have reason to speak all the time to businesses around the area. And the common theme I hear from all of them, large and small, is the shortage of our workforce. And central to that is the utter absence of any housing. Recently, I was having lunch with the leader of an organization we all know and love in Hanover, and that person described to me that their people commute 45 to 60 minutes each way each day. 2 years ago, our regional planning commissions did a study called Keys to the Valley. That study illustrated that by 2030, we're going to be 10,000 units short of housing in the region. This is partly why last year a number of businesses here in the Upper Valley, including Dartmouth Health, Dartmouth College, Hypertherm, King Arthur Baking, the co-op food stores, and Mascoma Bank, created the Upper Valley Housing Fund, contributing $10 million to this fund for housing envisioned that Twin Pines has. The range of that housing will meet those who are 60 to 80% of the average median income in Grafton County. And that is $37,000 for an individual on the low end, $75,000 on the high end for a family. Many of the businesses that we all use here, that's a lot of their workforce. That's almost half of the Mascoma workforce of 400 people. So on behalf of all the businesses that I speak to, their employees, I would implore the body to vote in support of this so that we can continue to provide you with the services and goods you desire and need. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comment?
Hi, my name's Dina Romero. I live at 1 Spencer Road in Hanover. I can't speak as eloquently to the subject as the 2 people who preceded me, but I'm a retired social worker. I used to work for the town of Hanover, and I often took care of the welfare general assistance caseload, which we did have and continue to have. The worst phone call would come on a Friday afternoon when somebody said, I need housing. I need a place to go. There's a perception by some other communities in the Upper Valley that we're not doing our fair share. And I think it's time we do our fair share. And I really hope that you, my fellow Hanover citizens, will support Article 15. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further comment? Those who have comment, I suggest that since it looks like several people do, I suggest that you come down and form a short line behind the microphone so we can just go right from there. Thanks. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, Dave Chaffee. I live on Partridge Road in the great village of Etna, New Hampshire. I've served several terms on the New Hampshire State Workforce Board, and there are representatives from virtually every county in the state, and we often discuss workforce. We put together job training programs, get people ready for jobs, and the three things that really slow things up with matching people with jobs are housing, transportation, childcare. Those are always the obstacles. The location of where these housing units will go will definitely solve two of those problems, housing and transportation, because you get somebody like Advanced Transit, they would go out there. And as Joanne Conroy was pointing out, I often, when I'm out at the medical center, I ask, where are you from? All the nurse assistants and everybody else. Claremont, St. Johnsbury, Bethel, suburb of Concord. The last time I was there, I was stymied, not stymied, but enjoyed by the answer I got. It was a young woman, and when I asked her where she was living, she said, I'm living in the Guile Tract, and I'm going to keep living there because I love my job at DHMC. And that's what we would get when we build some housing on Greensboro Road.
Thank you. Before we take another comment here, I'll turn over to this microphone.
Thank you. Just a question first. Does anybody have any idea how much this land is worth? Has it been appraised? Do we actually know how much money we're going to vote to give away tonight?
We did have it appraised, and it was at $250,000 for the land.
And you're talking about the 5 acres, correct?
Yes.
That can't possibly be right.
You're
telling me that land was appraised at $250,000 when the land just down the street
I'm going to
sold for
Jeff,
1.2
hang on,
million?
Hang on. I'm going to our planning and zoning director, Rob Hausman, was involved in this process.
In 2021, the entire property was assessed or appraised. We have that fair market appraisal in-house. It was approximately $250,000 carved out for the value of that parcel. It was understood that the constraint on it was limited to workforce housing. So that impacts the value.
So in other words, that's part of the deal, Jeff.
So in other words, that's not the real market value of the property. That's the market value if you put that artificial restriction. But that's
no, we're not going to debate that.
That's not really my point. So my point is this. First of all, I think the land is worth way more than $250,000. It's probably worth $2 million if we really were to put it on the open market. Not that I'm suggesting that at all. So I own a small business in town. I employ lots of people who live in and would benefit from workforce housing. But this is not a question about whether there's a housing crisis in the Upper Valley. There absolutely is a housing crisis in the Upper Valley. We all agree on that, okay? This is a question of whether this is the highest and best use of the town's resources and whether this is the right place to give away a valuable town piece of property to put 29 housing units on it. I don't care if they're workforce housing or luxury housing. right? They're not going on North Park Street. They're not going on Clement Road. They're going in the middle of a residential neighborhood on a road that is not designed to take that kind of traffic, that already has all sorts of issues. And we were told in 2020, when we voted on this, that what Julia Griffin envisioned was 6 to 8 cottages. So 6 to 8 cottages on Greensboro Road, in keeping with the other kind of smallish houses along Greensboro Road, made perfect sense to everybody. Well, now what we're being sold is a bigger piece of property to be given away with very few strings attached. I have no idea what would happen if Twin Pines ends up not building a project there. Do they get to sell the land? Do we get it back? Who knows? And instead of 6 to 8 cottages, 29 houses to be built, or 29 living units, presumably an apartment complex with paving, parking lots, blah, blah, blah. The question is not whether we have an affordable housing crisis or a housing crisis. Absolutely, we all know we do. The town has lots of property. We could give away lots of property to build housing on. We could take, for example, the downtown double-decker parking lot and add 4 stories on top of that. Be even better, be perfect, right? They're right downtown, then you have no transportation problems. You've got the infrastructure already there. But why this piece of property in this residential neighborhood should be given away for 29 apartment units by this town just astonishes me. And I ask you, would you vote for it if it was in your neighborhood? Would you vote for it? I wouldn't vote for it if it was proposed on Mulherron Farm. I wouldn't vote for it if it was proposed for North Park Street. I wouldn't vote for it if it was proposed on Wyeth Farm Road. It's an inappropriate use of town resources. We have a housing crisis in this town, no question. This is not the way to solve it. This is going to make a bunch of people feel like they did something, and then we've got a 29-unit apartment complex in the middle of a residential neighborhood where it doesn't belong. And don't think for a minute that because it still has to go through zoning board approval and planning board approval, that that will change things, because they will be powerless to make any meaningful changes. Those of us that live on Greensboro Road have already seen this time and time again. And I wouldn't vote for it in your neighborhood, and I'd ask you not to vote for it in mine. And that's with all due respect to all the great work that Twin Pines does, and with all due acknowledgement of the fact that we have a huge housing crisis in the Upper Valley.
Thank you, Jeff. First, before I take these comments, I'm going to take this comment over here from this gentleman.
Hi, my name is Roger Sloboda. I live on Greensboro Road as well. I have a quick question and probably a comment much the same as Jeff's. By convey, does that mean transfer the title to the property at Twin Pines?
Convey, that is the meaning of convey.
So I'm totally sensitive to housing. When my wife and I made a donation to buy this property, which was considerably large for us financially, the figure was 7 cottages, as Jeff described. Now the goalposts have moved, and now it's 29. Are they going to move again? Is it going to be 42? I would like to see a plan of some sort on what this property is actually going to have on it before town meeting votes on it. What, for example, happens if it gets conveyed to Twin Pines and then everybody in Washington defaults on the budget and the economy tanks and Twin Pines goes out of business? Now they've got our property, they don't have the means to build on it, and yet we haven't got any workforce housing. So I'm going to vote no on this article and hope that the town eventually comes back to town meeting and shows us a plan for what's going to happen to that property in my neighborhood. Yes, I'm an abutter, but I'm totally sensitive to people getting hired. My house is on 5 acres. I can guarantee that my 5 acres is assessed for way more than $250,000. So there's a lot of stuff going on here that I'm not sure I understand, and things keep changing in town hall and in town board and all this stuff, and I want to understand what's going on before I vote to convey this kind of property.
Okay, since it was a question for the select board, at least in part, I'll have Joanna respond.
So when we voted on this in 2020, we said at the zoning at the time, 2020, we could get approximately based on we could get approximately 6 units. So 15,000 square feet per unit in the SR district, which is 2 acres, and then 3 acres per unit in the RR zone. So that's how we get to 6. Last year, we all voted during the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. voting. We upzoned or allowed for an increase in the amount of housing that we could put along, well, in many parts of the town. The post-zoning amendment, didn't have anything to do with you, Nico. It was another zoning amendment by the planning board, our officials, allows for 7,500 square feet per unit for all of the 5 acres in this zone, so that gives us approximately 29 acres. If we were to change the zoning again, up zone, down zone, it would change again, but that's what we decided to do last year. So I just wanted to point that out.
Before we move, there's additional comment. This is obviously not done in terms of a debate, but I do want to announce that the ballot polling on the 3 bond questions we spoke about earlier, Articles 9 through 11, is prepared to close. If anybody still has to cast a ballot, please take a couple minutes to do that, and we'll close it out when we close out the debate on this Article 15. Ma'am.
Sandra Ho, 35 Cummings Road, Kendall. As a former elected official in a large city, the arguments are not a surprise to me. We call it NIMBY, and I'm sorry to say that. No matter where you try to put something like affordable housing, someone or some people are going to object. It seems to me, and I lived here from 67 to 72, and people could afford to buy houses in Hanover, and Jim Wright reminded me of that. This is a need that we have. It is a great need that we have, and I cannot understand people objecting to workforce housing in Hanover. It's desperately needed. And yes, I would not object if it was on my street. Okay, someone said it was on my street. Please support this. We need it very much.
Thank you. Next comment, Mr. Macri. Anyone further over here? Okay, stand by.
Hello, I'm Nicholas Macri, live on Webster Avenue. Really just echoing everything you just said. I would support this if it was on my street, and I would support this in lots of places, because those business owners and other people have really accurately portrayed just how dire our need for workforce housing is. I think it's appropriate, and I think it is the highest and best use of this land. We need to give people places to live.
Thank you. Comment?
Yes, Rich Howarth from Hanover Center. First of all, let me say that I plan to vote in favor of this motion. But when the number 29 was put on the table, and I read the zoning ordinance, I see several things about the ordinance. One is that this will be a major subdivision. And if you do rural subdivisions that extend into rural residential districts, which this would, then there's a legal question about how that would work and what densities you could afford. And I'm aware of the idea that the densities allowed in SR2 would be extended into our portion. But the ordinance that we passed last year wasn't actually very well crafted. I think it's probably unclear. The other thing is that while we allowed higher densities, we did not change the dimensional requirements. And if you look at the dimensional requirements in the SR2 district, it's hard to see when you start moving pieces of paper around on a map, which I've done. It's hard to see how you could have more than about 14 housing units at that site, which is actually consistent with what we were told at town meeting by Julia Griffin. My recollection was that she said it was 6 to 10. I mean, we could argue about what that is. Maybe 14 is a good number, but I'm disappointed in the select board and in the town manager that this idea was brought forward without homework and a plan. And I'm going to vote for it because the housing need is there, but I think we need to do better in terms of planning and communication.
Thank you. Next comment here, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Ann Hill. I live on Lebanon Street here in Hanover, so I'm a resident. I'm in support of this article. I also am a new employee of Twin Pines Housing. I'm their homeownership coordinator and general counsel. I was just speaking to my boss over there who said that in this conveyance, we would not take this property until it has been through the proper processes, the zoning and planning processes. So there will be ample opportunities to still have input on what goes there. This has happened with both Guile Hill and Summer Park, where land has been conveyed to Twin Pines, and then it's gone through the zoning and planning processes, the results. I wanted to just also speak on a corollary issue of affordable housing in Hanover. For those homeownership units that we've created at Guile Hill, there is a corollary issue of property tax affordability. This is going to be something that we'll hopefully be addressing with you later. But once you get affordable housing units in Hanover, it becomes more and more difficult for folks to afford the very high property taxes. And there are ways in which we can address that.
Thank you. Further comment, Ms. Nelson?
Yes, my name's Deb Nelson, and I live on Forest Edge Drive, which sounds like Goldilocks, and it sort of is. But it is right off of Greensboro Road. So I am a neighbor. I live about I think it's a mile to walk down to this particular site. And what I would like to do is invite anybody who's interested to pull into our complex. I live in a U-shaped group of buildings. There is no fourth side, but there are 23 units in that U-shape around a courtyard. We all park inside and then go up. So it's not great if you can't do stairs, but it's dense, it's attractive. We never have any problems when one goes on the market. People like them. If that fourth side had been filled in, it would be 30 units. I can do my math. And I welcome you to come in. It's just down Greensboro Road on the left. So there's College Hill, Velvet Rocks, Silent Brook, whatever the road is called from the road. But go in and turn right, and you can just do a loop around a very tight 24-unit bunch of housing. And I have every confidence in Twin Pines and in Andrew Winter that what results will be something we're proud of. It's not, our 20, whatever many units it is, 23 units are not on 5 acres of land. And some of you may have done the survey that came out a few months ago about housing, and it showed pictures of, would you like this? Would you like that? And one of them was of our complex. Now, I don't know how many people said they would like housing that looked like that, but I would love to extend an invitation to anybody just to drive through and see and count that there are that many houses that close together, and we are a wonderful neighborhood. We are a community in that community. We shovel out our neighbors, as Laura knows. We catch loose dogs, as I did today. We drive one another to doctor visits. We take in packages for neighbors. We flush toilets when people are away on vacation. So it's a really nice little neighborhood on a really nice street, and oh my God, I want to live in a town where the cheapest house isn't $1 million. Thank you.
Thank you. Next comment.
Hi, I'm Deb Olson, and I live on Greensboro Road, very close to where this would happen. And I basically am in favor of workforce housing, and I think that that might be a good thing to do. What concerns me is that I don't know anything about Twin Pines, and it might help to know something about Twin Pines because it sounds like we're just conveying the property to them. And they haven't yet told us what they're going to do with it precisely. So I would like just someone to give me, and probably the lawyer, give me an explanation of what does it mean for us to convey the property before we know what their exact plan is and we've approved it?
Well, that's not really a legal conveyance, is simply, conveying property to someone else. However, I know there are Twin Pine representatives here in the audience.
I'll take it.
No, no, Joanna.
Call it.
There are Twin Pines people here who could respond to that particular question succinctly. Is there anybody who can do that? Yes, sir.
Am I allowed to cross from
Yes.
one side to the
Yeah, we recognize you as the...
Hi. Andrew Winter, Executive Director at Twin Pines Housing Trust. Am I okay?
It's in the rules.
I'm okay.
You're okay. Please speak.
Okay. So again, Andrew Winter, Executive Director at Twin Pines, former Hanover resident. When I was living in Hanover before I moved to Norwich, where I hope to build housing soon, one of the things that I was most proud of at Twin Pines was finishing the Guile Hill development. I know we've got some residents here at Guile Hill who know how hard that battle was to finish that project. But that was 20 acres that the town gave to Twin Pines with the requirement that 50% of the units be developed as affordable housing, and we did that. It wasn't easy. We overcame the Great Recession, but at the end of the day, we delivered 120 units. You heard a little bit about some of the folks who live there and how important that housing is to them and how it has allowed them to access their jobs at Dartmouth-Hitchcock, whether it's Dartmouth-Hitchcock, the college elsewhere in the Upper Valley. That housing's been critically important. More recently, we undertook the redevelopment of Summer Park. And for those of you who remember Summer Park, 24 units of senior housing built in the 1970s. The town conveyed that, and again, that was through the town meeting process, to Twin Pines. And basically taking those 24 units and then another parcel, we were able to develop 42 units of housing that sit right across the street. We're proud of that work. We're proud of the partnership that we have with the town. We are a nonprofit. We have a board that includes members of this community. I see a couple of my board members here today. So we are a nonprofit. But we really depend on the relationship that we have with our local communities to develop housing. And I am very much hopeful that this body will work with us to convey the property and allow us to develop up to 29 units. But again, that's going to be a process that is subject to planning and zoning board approvals throughout, as well as the final approval of the select board. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Christie, last comment.
Just a few points of clarification. It's my understanding that this parcel was acquired with the requirement that it be used for workforce housing. So it's not open to be sold other than to be conveyed, to be worked on, to be developed as workforce housing. Secondly, the change in zoning, and permits a higher density utilization of that property. And we brought that increase to the public's attention sort of as a full disclosure. It was not intended to signal an intent to have that many units on that property. Third thing is, we've worked with Twin Pines on many projects very successfully, and I believe this motion is a requirement, prerequisite, for us being able to start working with them or some other developer to actually do the plans that we need before anything would be accepted. So this is a prerequisite to let us get started on some planning, either with Twin Pines or someone else, for the intended use of workforce housing.
Thank you. One more comment, Ms. Kari.
Thank you. So Kari Asmussen, again, I'm just speaking in the capacity of a independent individual, not on behalf of any committee. I guess, first of all, I did, because it's come up a couple of times, I wanted to say I have a very distinct memory, because I asked the question at the 2020 pre-town meeting hearings. The question came up, and I brought it up, is, does this land now, with the language from the 2020 town meeting, does it need to be conveyed for workforce housing or affordable housing, and the answer at the time, and I even said, say that we are in the middle of a economic downturn. Could we sell the land on the open market? And the answer from our town meeting, or from our town manager at that time, was yes, we could. So I just want to say that I think that there is some question, and not quite as black and white of an answer as maybe is being presented here tonight, but that's actually not why I stood up to speak again. And I just want to also say to everyone that I actually have not heard of anybody say that they are against workforce housing on this parcel. I think it's more a matter of what it looks like, how many there are, etc. And compared to the past two examples, Guile Hill, well, there was a site analysis and a feasibility study done before it came to town meeting. We don't see that this time. For the Sumner House housing, the warrant article said that it would be conveyed after funding was in hand and the planning board approval. And we don't have that condition on this warrant article. So I have to say that although I've not heard anybody say that they're against the idea of some housing, I just have to say that this is being conveyed and communicated in a very different way. Back, maybe it was in February, when I think the select board first looked at this language, I said, well, the 5 acres, that is where the public parking is now, and I think that a number of us have seen the parking there be completely full. So if we give away the area where there's public access, how do we make sure that there's public access? Because all the people who donated money to conserve the land envisioned that there'd be access. How do you also, if the housing is going to be dense, make sure that you're able to protect the wildlife corridor along the wetlands, which has a statewide rating or whatever. So I guess my question, again, is not coming from a place of how do we stop the housing. The question is where in this process, which is outside of the planning board, where do those things get discussed, and how do we make sure that those needs for our community are addressed? And I haven't again, heard or seen anything about those. I have to say also, I remember in 2020, these cottages were to have a solar array on each one so that they're going to be sustainable. That's not part of the planning board process either. So how do we see that happen if that's what we value as a community? I mean, I know that I helped contribute to a piece by the Public Trust for Land on butterflies on the southern portion. And, so I'm really concerned. Is this going to be a development where neonicotinoids, and I know I'm just speaking really poorly right now, are used, and potentially. So, I mean, there's all sorts of things that I think, all sorts of values I think that we as a community would like to see embodied in this parcel and in this development. And I don't know when that's going to happen. And that's my concern tonight.
Thank you. So I'd like to call the question on this. If there's any further debate on an issue that has not been spoken about yet, I'll hear it. Otherwise, I'd like to move things along. Yes, ma'am. Something that hasn't been mentioned yet.
My name's Carol Sloboda.
Please come to the microphone.
Carol Sloboda, and I live on Greensboro Road, and I'm in a butter. And like everyone else, yes, we do need workforce housing. But that area of Greensboro Road, my daughter was in an accident there. It's not safe. It's 29 houses will now be added. What is that? 70 cars easily? And it's too many. And if we could find another area where it's not on the curve, you can't walk your dog there anymore. And 70 cars adds to that. It's just become almost insufferable, the traffic, and I can't tell you what it does for me to think about the addition of more traffic. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Okay, so having heard the debate in the community on an important and controversial issue, I'm now going to call the question on Article 15. All in favor of Article 15, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Nay. The motion carries. Article 15 passes. To introduce Article 16, Athos Racias.
I move that the town vote to adopt rental housing ordinance number 42 pursuant to RSA 48/A as prepared, reviewed, and approved by the Select Board to establish standards governing the condition and maintenance of dwelling units offered for rent with the goal of ensuring that they are safe, sanitary, and fit for human habitation. To authorize the inspection of such dwellings and the imposition of penalties for violation of the ordinance, and to define certain responsibilities and duties of owners and occupants of such dwellings.
Thank you. Those making your way out, try to be quiet. Do I have a second on Article 16, please? Seconded here in the center. Comment from Mr. Racias.
Since that article was written, several issues have arisen that I would like to propose two amendments. Excuse me, Mr. Moderator, to propose them both at the same time, or?
Yes, I propose that we address, well, they're different, as I understand it, they're different areas of the attached ordinance. So maybe you explain them, and then we will propose the modifications one by one.
Okay. Or I'm wondering if I should explain the primary article first.
Yeah, you can explain the primary article and then propose the amendments.
Okay. So I take back what I said about the amendments. I'm going to propose those in a second. They are not substantial and address certain issues, small issues that have come up that we think are important to include, and I'll come to them later. Speaking to the article that I just moved, Hanover has had a rental housing problem for many years in that some rental units are unsafe and dangerous from a health and safety standpoint. The combination of a relatively small housing stock accompanied by a high demand and a significantly transient population being the most significant stressor leading to this situation. The town originally tried to address this problem by adopting a rental housing ordinance in 2013 that required all rental housing to be registered. Following the pattern of most of our ordinances, the system was complaint-driven and did not give the town the authority to inspect potentially unsafe units without first receiving a complaint. That system has not worked, and a serious problem persists. Subsequently, many dedicated individuals went back to the drawing board to address the situation. So what process have we followed to arrive at where we stand tonight? And I'm compelled at this point, at the outset, to note that this has been the most thorough and inclusive process for an ordinance that I have experienced throughout my years on the Select Board. Additionally, and importantly, in 2020, voters approved zoning Article 14 that allowed short-term rentals, which, quote, shall become effective only upon the Select Board adoption of a rental housing inspection ordinance that establishes occupancy standards and a registration and inspection process for all rental properties, end quote. The original draft of the ordinance, which of course can be found in the appendix, was developed by our planning department with input from the town manager and legal counsel. The Select Board has held multiple hearings, received feedback at many Select Board meetings, and held a workshop on the ordinance. We received abundant feedback and on many occasions incorporated those changes. At a public hearing on October 17th, 2022, the Select Board adopted Ordinance Number 42, which is what we're discussing, only to later determine that under New Hampshire law, this ordinance needs to be adopted by town meeting, which is why we're here tonight. As I said earlier, you can find the full text of the ordinance in Appendix B of the town report, and there on the website there is an extensive list of FAQs, earlier drafts, and lots more information. This ordinance takes a different approach to reaching the same goal we had in 2013 in that it will allow the town to inspect all rental units every 3 years or more frequently if it believes an unsafe condition exists. The cost has been kept as low as possible to an amount we believe will not substantially impact the rental market or future development of additional rental units. The cost will be borne by the owners of the units, but most likely be passed on to their tenants. While there is a public good to having safe rental units, we believe that the cost should primarily be borne by those who receive rental income as part of the cost of doing business. The general public will be financially supporting this program by providing the needed infrastructure within our planning office, our human resource office, and other departments as they get involved. And that's where I'm going to leave off discussion, and I'm not sure when to make those.
So apparently there are some technical amendments that want to be offered here. So what we'll have Mr. Rossius do is state the nature of the amendments, which, as I understand it, are to the ordinance, not to the question. So the question
Correct.
Incorporates the text of the ordinance, which is under Exhibit B in your book. So these amendments will be to the text of the ordinance. So you're going to state the amendments that you proposed. Alex is going to put them in writing on the video screen, and then we'll discuss the proposed amendment.
Proposed amendment number 1. I move that the Town of Hanover rental housing ordinance be amended as follows. Add a clause to section 7, parentheses D, the following language. Pursuant to RSA 48-A:4, and as a last sentence to Roman numeral 8, parentheses E, the following language. Quote, if the owner fails to comply with such an order, the town may file a petition in Superior Court pursuant to RSA 48-A:4. And the second amendment, Mr. Moderator, as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Proposed amendment number 2. I move that the Town of Hanover rental housing ordinance be amended as follows. Remove the last sentence regarding the standard of review on appeal from section 8, Roman numeral 8, parentheses G. And I think you just did that. Great. Thank you, Alex. And as you can see, those are relatively minor additions that we thought, relatively minor alterations that we thought were important to bring to town meeting.
Okay, so the question right now on the table is not the substance of the overall question, but the question of whether to amend as set forth by Mr. Rossius in the talk he just gave and as depicted on the screen here. Do I have a second? Seconded. Thank you. Any comment, opinion, questions, et cetera? Kari?
So Kari Asmus, speaking as an individual. So if the town were to file, what is the first, the exact wording? Were to file actually, the one that actually says about the town going to the court is this. Okay, if the town, may file a petition in the Superior Court pursuant to 48A:4, which I happen to have with me because I've been following this as well. I'm realizing though that 48A:5 then says that the court shall, as soon as practical, issue its order upon said petition, and if the court finds the dwelling complained against is unfit for human habitation due to any of the causes of conditions enumerated in RSA 48A:2, such order shall direct the public agency, meaning the town or the planning board, or not the planning board, but the planning department, to repair, alter, or improve such dwelling to render it fit for habitation. And then it goes on to say so the town would encumber those costs, and then if the owner didn't pay them back, then there's a whole liening section. So I was just wondering if the town really intended that should the court agree with the town that this place needed fixing up, that the town then was going to be the agent for doing the work and then would bill the owner. Because there was an earlier conversation where the select board said they didn't want that. And now I think that is required by virtue of adopting that part of 48A4. And I have to say, I know that we felt that this was a technical amendment, but it actually is quite, in my opinion, complicated. And I feel that without having gotten this in advance, I mean, I got word on Monday, yesterday, that it was coming, although I didn't see the exact wording. So I feel I'm a little prepared. But if I hadn't gotten sort of a warning yesterday, and I was sitting here, I would really not know what I was voting on.
Yeah. I'm wondering if Laura can comment on the statutory interrelation between the two provisions.
So let me start by saying that regardless of whether or not this 48A4 language is in here, that is the statutory mechanism for enforcing the ordinance. So, you know, we have it set up so that we can impose fees and fines before we go to court, but if we have to go to court, that is the process that is set forth in the statute. 48A5 does set forth what the court can order in remedy of the situation. The court could order the town to make the changes, and frankly, that is often the best relief the town can get because you are assured that the improvements get made. And then you can turn around and lien the property. So the town has to front the costs, but it does get repaid the costs. And I doubt it would be town personnel actually going out there to do the work. I'd imagine you would hire someone and then lien the property for the full amount of the cost.
Actually, a follow-up question on that. Does that mean that these provisions in the statute exist whether this language is in this ordinance or not?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Further comment, opinion, or questions on the proposed amendment?
If I shout, can I stay here?
No, Jeff, it's very hard. It's actually very hard to hear, but I understand the.
Just a point of clarification. If the town files a lien, is that superior to any existing liens on the property, or would that be inferior to existing mortgages and unpaid taxes and such?
That's a very good question. Laura? Checking the statute.
Such lien shall be subordinate to any mortgage, tax lien, or encumbrance of record filed on the municipality's lien. However, it does allow, oh, no. If the lien is not satisfied within 120 days, it may be foreclosed upon.
Okay. So, thank you. Further comment, questions, opinion on the amendments to Article 16 and specifically Exhibit B? There being none, I will call the question. In favor of amending the proposed ordinance Exhibit B as set forth on the board here, say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. The motion carries. The article has been amended such that the Exhibit B has been amended to the degree we have spelled out here. So now comment on the amended article. Opinion, questions? One speaker, please state your name and your address. Chris.
Chris Kennedy, Kingsford Road. I just wanted to clarify something, and based on the answer to that, I may have another question. So this rental ordinance in the comments at the beginning, there was something which alluded to how this might affect the short-term rental zoning that was agreed to or voted for, but was not allowed to be in place until there was a rental. This item, is that right? So if this gets voted yes, then short-term rentals are allowed in town?
Rob, would you be able to speak to that? Thank you.
Chris, you're absolutely correct. There is a short-term rental housing provision in our zoning ordinance that would allow hosted short-term rental up to 90 days and unhosted for 30 days, provided that the units are owner-occupied. So it doesn't allow for the commercialization wholesale of short-term rentals.
Okay, that's just what I wanted to clarify. So it's a limited short-term rental that we have.
That's correct. It was intended to enable people to generate some revenue, maintain the Dartmouth graduation practice and other things like that, but not allow a sweeping change in our housing market.
Thank you. Further comment, questions, opinion? There being none, I will call the question on amended Article 16. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Article 16 carries. For the next article, Mr. Racias.
Article 17, I move that, excuse me. I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate $10,000 for deposit into the Land and Capital Improvements Fund, an expendable trust, and to fund this appropriation by authorizing the withdrawal of this amount from the unassigned fund balance. The amount appropriated is equivalent of 50% of the total land use change tax collected in the fiscal year 2021-2022.
Do I have a second on Article 17? So seconded. Further comment on Article 17? Kari?
Can I say something first?
Mm-hmm. Oh, Kari, hold on. I want
Yes, sure.
Ethos to comment.
This article and the subsequent, losing track of articles, 3 or 4 articles. In 1999, the town meeting voted to create a Land and Capital Improvements Fund and a Conservation Fund, and then annually to consider taking the proceeds from the preceding fiscal year's land use change tax and distributing 1/2 to the Land and Capital Improvements Fund and 1/2 to the Conservation Fund. These articles are effectuating those procedures for this year, and it is yearly on our warrants.
Kari?
Yes, so Kari Asmus again. I know that during the public hearings that we confirmed that we thought that the $10,000 was exactly 1/2 of the taxes that had been collected, but it seemed very odd that it should be such a round number. And however, I accepted it, but then I got the annual report, and on page 126, we have the tax collector's report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2022. And if you go about halfway down, it says collections during fiscal year 2022. And it says land use change taxes, $36,885. And I was wondering why we weren't using that amount instead of the taxes committed during 2021. Because it seemed to me that we are talking about the taxes collected during fiscal year 2022.
May I ask a question? Do you have similar comments with respect to Articles 18 through 21?
It would affect 17 and 18. It would not affect 19 or 20.
Okay, thank you.
Alex, I don't have an answer for that at the top of my head.
Because if it were to be, if the number should be, half of $36,885, then I could offer an amendment. If $20,000 split in two is really the real number, then we can leave it the way it is. It's just that I would prefer not to have a correction article next year.
I'm not sure how to handle it. What do you, Ellen?
So I understand, Kari, I don't think my mic's on.
Just lean into it a little closer.
I understand that the report does state the $36,000. The number that these are based on, the 20,000 split 50-50, are based on the entries that were made into our general ledger. And what I would have to do, and I can take a minute to do, is to understand if the tax year and our fiscal year are impacting these figures. Because I did very carefully go through the collection of those land use change tax fees into our general ledger, and that's what the 10,000 into each fund is based on.
I would just point out then, so that, under that line, it says, collection during fiscal year 2022, land use change taxes, 36,000. And then if you go directly up from there, that column does say 2021 tax year, and 2021 tax year supports fiscal year 2022, which is confusing that they have different numbers in them, but it is tax year 2021 that supports fiscal year 22.
Thank you. Any further comment on Article 17? Hearing none, all in favor of Article 17 say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Article 17 carries. I will accept a motion from the floor. I want this to be quick, just to take a sense of the room. If we can combine Articles 18 through 21 into one motion, we'll read them. Do I have a second? Second. It has been seconded. We do need to read the articles, and then we can take a vote.
Article 18, I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate $10,000 for deposit into the Conservation Fund, and to fund this appropriation by authorizing the withdrawal of this amount from the unassigned fund balance. The amount appropriated is equivalent of 50% of the total land use change tax collected in the fiscal year 2021-2022. Article 19, I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate $33,353 for deposit into the Land and Capital Improvements Fund and Expendable Trust, and to fund this appropriation by authorizing the withdrawal of this amount from the unassigned fund balance. This corrects the amount appropriated at the 2022 town meeting and is the balance of the equivalent of 50% of the total land use change tax collected in the fiscal year 2020-2021. Article 20, I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate $33,353 for deposit into the Conservation Fund, and to fund this appropriation by authorizing the withdrawal of this amount from the unassigned fund balance. This corrects the amount appropriated at the 2022 town meeting and is the balance of the equivalent of 50% of the total land use change tax collected in the fiscal year 2020-2021.
Thank you. So the motion on the floor is to consolidate those amendments into one vote. It has been moved and seconded. So all in favor of consolidating those into one vote say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. That motion carries. So now I will take a vote on Articles 17 through 21. All in favor, yes, Article 18 through 21. 18 through 21. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Thank you. All 18 through 21 carry.
Not 21.
Oh.
Just 20.
I apologize. So let the record reflect that the question that was just asked should have been for 18 through 20. Thank you, sir.
Can I just grab my soda?
So introducing Article 21, Nancy Carter.
I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate $34,065 for deposit into the Municipal Transportation Improvement Fund, a capital reserve fund, to fund this appropriation by authorizing the withdrawal of this amount from the unassigned fund balance. The amount is equivalent to the total transportation fee surcharge, which is for each motor vehicle which is registered in the town of Hanover, $5 per vehicle during the year 21-22.
Do I have a second? Thank you, I see a second. Do you need to comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to do a really quick comment about the fact, because I'm sure I'll be asked, that the projected balance in this fund in June 30 of 22 is approximately $49,600, and these funds are used for highway improvements, signal upgrades, the development of bicycle and pedestrian paths.
Thank you. Any, let's see. Do I have a second? Seconded. Any comment? Thank you. I'll call the question. Article 21, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. The motion carries. Article 21 carries. Nancy Carter, Article 22.
Okay, gang, I am super sorry for this, but the law says. To see if the town will vote to raise and approve the sum of $2,093,451 to authorize payment into existing capital reserve funds in the following amounts for purposes for which funds were established. The Ambulance Equipment Capital Reserve Fund, with funding to come from the Ambulance Fund, $105,567. Building Maintenance and Improvement Capital Reserve Fund, with funding to be raised through taxation, $199,600. Dispatch Equipment and Dispatch Center Enhancements Capital Reserve Fund, $17,981, funding to be raised through taxation. Fire Department Vehicle and Equipment Fund Reserve, with funding to come from the Fire Fund, $160,000. Highway Construction and Maintenance Equipment Reserve Fund, with funding to be raised through taxation, $471,840. Parking Operations Vehicles and Parking Fund Improvements Capital Reserve Fund, with funding to come from the Parking Fund, $174,955. Police Vehicles and Capital Equipment Reserve Fund, with funding to be raised through taxation, $120,000. Road Construction and Improvements Capital Reserve Fund, with funding to be raised through taxation, $55,300. Sewer Equipment and Facilities Improvements Capital Reserve Fund, with funding to come from Wastewater Treatment Facility Fund, $307,000. Water Treatment and Distribution Equipment and System Capital Reserve Fund, with funding to come from the Water Utility Fund, $481,208. Thanks, Harold.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you. Seconded. Any comment, question, or debate on Article 22? There being none, I'll call the question. All in favor of Article 22, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. The article carries. Thank you. Article 23, Nancy Carter.
I have an amendment on this, so do you want me to read the question first? Okay. Okay. Here we go. So now what we're doing is basically spending the money that you just set aside, okay? I move to see that the town will vote to raise and appropriate $2,495,500 for the purposes listed below, and to authorize funding in these amounts to be withdrawn from the listed capital reserve funds in the following amount: Building Maintenance and Improvement Capital Reserve Fund, Howe Roof Replacement, $200,000. Fire Department Vehicle and Equipment Reserve Fund, Metal Door Replacement in the Fire Department, Phase 2, $15,500. Highway Construction and Maintenance Equipment Capital Reserve Fund, DPW Fleet 12-6, wheel dump truck with plow, wheel dump truck with another plow, at 14.6 wheel dump, and 3 sidewalk tractors and a 20-ton equipment trailer, $673,000. Parking operations, vehicles, and parking facility improvements, capital reserve fund, parking facility lighting conversion, membrane repair, police vehicles and equipment, capital reserve fund, police cruiser replacements, 4 of them, and mobile data terminals, $296,000. Water treatment and distribution equipment and system capital, reserve fund, Greensboro Road lead abatement, water meter phase 1, F550 dump truck, for $487,000. Sewer equipment and facilities improvements, capital reserve fund, water meter phase 1 and truck 16222 for $304,000. This will be a non-lapsing appropriation pursuant to RSA 32:7(6), will not, Roman numeral 6, will not lapse until these specific purchases are complete or June 30th, 2028, whichever occurs sooner.
Thank you. Do I have a second on Article 23? Thank you. We have a second. Any opinion or comment on Article 23?
I was, Kari Asmus, I was under the impression that perhaps there was going to be an amendment to this article.
There is a proposed amendment. Motion to amend on the floor. What is the motion?
Thank you, Kari. To see if the, so this is just a technical situation. It was left off your articles. To see if the town will vote and raise to appropriate. So now the new total becomes $2,527,500 if you approve road construction and improvements capital fund reserve for school zone speed flashers to the amount of $32,000, which causes it to be a slightly larger number. Want to move the amendment first and then?
Yes, so there's a motion on the table to move to amend Article 23 to add a $31,000 expense for a capital reserve fund for the school zone and certain lighting, which would change the total to $2,527,500. We will take comment on this, but before we do, I'm advised by Attorney Spector Morgan.
Unfortunately, this would not be deemed a legal amendment by the Department of Revenue Administration because it adds a new purpose to the warrant that was not warned. So I would recommend that you do not amend the warrant article to include this cost.
Further comment or opinion? Yes, sir. Lawyers.
Jim Rubens, 11 Laramie Road. I'm going to vote for this warrant, but I'm going to express my concern about the $520,000 removed from the parking facilities related capital reserve fund for a purpose that looks to me more like maintenance. Again, I'm going to vote for this, but the membrane on the parking structure has failed prematurely, and I would hope that the select board and those who manage parking will be more restrained with respect to withdrawals from the capital reserve fund, which is intended to enhance the capacity of our parking system in the downtown as opposed to maintain the existing system. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was a comment on the substance of the article, which we'll take into account when we took a vote on that. Right now, there's a motion on the floor to amend. There's been comment that it would be an unlawful amendment. So I will go ahead and call. Is there a second on the proposed amendment? There's a second. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jeff. All in favor of the amendment, say aye. All opposed? The amendment has been rejected. Okay, now we are back to the original text of the article, taking Mr. Rubin's comment into consideration. Any further comment on Article 23? Thank you very much. All in favor of Article 23, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you. I will take a motion to consolidate Articles 24, 25, and 26, which are the 3 union contract articles. So moved. Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you. Here in the front. And who's going to, you got it, Bill? Bill, if you could please read the 3.
All right, so I'll read it in the collective bargaining agreement, 93, Local 1348, Public Works Department employees, on March 6, 2023, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing level, year 2023-2024, estimated increase $202,503. And further, to raise the appropriate the sum of $202,503 for the 2023-2024 fiscal year, such sum representing additional costs attributed to the increase in the salaries and benefits required by the proposed agreement over those that would be paid at current staffing levels in accordance with the most recent collective bargaining agreement. Article 25. I move to see if the town will vote to approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Select Board and the International Association of Firefighters, Local 3288, on March 6, 2023, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing level. Year 2023-2024, estimated increase, $175,226. And further, to raise and appropriate the sum of $175,226 for the 2023-2024 fiscal year, such sum representing additional costs attributed to the increase in the salaries and benefits required by the proposed agreement over those that would be paid at current staffing levels in accordance with the most recent collective bargaining agreement. Article 26. To see if the town will vote to approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Select Board and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Council 93, Local 3657, Police Department employees, on March 6, 2023, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing level. Year 2023-2024, estimated increase, $170,176. And further, to raise and appropriate the sum of $170,176 for the 2023-2024 fiscal year, such sum representing additional costs attributed to the increase in the salaries and benefits required by the proposed agreement over those that would be paid at current staffing levels in accordance with the most recent collective bargaining agreement.
Thank you. So the motion on the table is to consolidate Articles 24, 25, and 26 into one question for approval. Do I have a second? Yes, thank you. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. So we are consolidating Articles 24, 25, and 26 into one question for the purposes of passage. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Articles 24, 25, and 26 are passed. Article 27, Bill.
Do you want to have a discussion or clarification?
Oh.
On,
Yeah,
I do.
Okay.
Just a summary so people know what they're voting for, which they already voted for.
Yes, I do apologize. I'm not trying to move anyone through this faster than we need to, but I am taking note of the fact that there are almost literally more staff in this room than there are voters of the town of Hanover at this point, and I'm trying to move it on. I'm happy to take comment on the articles, and then if there's a motion for reconsideration, I'm happy to entertain it.
I just think it's important to take a moment to recognize that the staff involved with these negotiations were very constructive, working very closely with our management team. Also, the increases in all the information related to this, which is the number one biggest cost in the operating budget, are on pages 41 and 42 in the green section. And when all these raises are increased, even though you're not voting on it, any non-union employees get a similar deal. So we are treating everyone equivalently. I think that's important for you to know that.
Thank you very much. Further comment on Articles 24, 25, and 26? The record will reflect that they were passed. Thank you. Article 27, to be introduced by Mr. Garrity.
I move to see the town per RSA 31:98A will vote to raise and appropriate $25,000 into the town's annual contingency fund for fiscal year 2023-2024. This sum to come from taxation.
Do I have a second for Article 27? Seconded. Thank you. Any comment, opinion? Thank you, Bill.
This is a new approach. We haven't done this in the past. Most towns do have a contingency fund. What we've tried to do in this budget cycle is to tighten up as much as we can. This $25,000 will give us the ability to on things that might not have been anticipated. The world's not perfect when you're dealing with $28–30 million. It gives us some flexibility, and again, it would be reported. If any money was expended out of this approved amount, would be in the information for the town next year.
Further comment on Article 27? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of Article 27 say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The motion carries. Article 27 carries. To introduce Article 28, Mr. Christie.
I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate $28,555,313 to pay the operating expenses of the town for the 23-24 fiscal year for the purposes set forth in the town budget. This sum does not include the preceding or succeeding articles.
Do I have a second on Article 28? Thank you. Seconded. Mr. Christie, further comment?
This is dangerous, but given the bright eyes I'm seeing in front of me, I've prepared a brilliant and insightful budget speech. But if someone would like to move the question, I would not be offended.
So we need a 2/3 vote to sustain a question to cut off debate on an issue. So first of all, we have a motion on the floor to move straight to a vote. Do we have a second? We have a second. Okay. So essentially it's, my discretion as to what I hear in the room in terms of yay or nay, and I'm going to do my best. No. So all in favor of proceeding directly to the question on Article 28 say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Nay. That sounds like it exceeded 2/3 to me. So I will say that we have passed the motion to proceed directly to the question on Article 28. Therefore, on Article Jeff, I understand that the body has acted. All in favor of Article 28 say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Nay. sounds like a paper ballot to me. Or we can do a hand count. We can do a hand count. So we're going to do a hand count. So please raise your hand. We're going to do aye first. Okay? Please raise your hand. Article 28, all in favor, raise your hand with your chit. Thank you. We will count them. Carrie, can you help us count, please? $56. Okay, 56. No, I got Bill. 56. Okay, 56 favor passage of Article 28. Please raise your chit if you oppose the passage of Article 28. So these are nay votes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. So by my reckoning, that exceeds Article 28 passes. Thank you. Very tired. 56 to 10. 56 to 10. Now, I also have, we received while we were debating these issues, ballot results on both the ballot questions and the official ballot. With respect to Article number 9, we had 140 yes votes and 12 no votes, so Article 9 carries. With respect to Article 10, we had 141 yes votes and 11 no votes, so Article 10 carries. With respect to Article 11, we have 145 yes votes and 7 no votes, so Article 11 carries. In addition, we have the following results from the official ballot voting, which occurred today throughout the day from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for Select Board. Carrie Callahan, 596 votes. Jenny Chamberlain, 545 votes. Peter Christie, 427 votes. 3 write-ins. For trustee of the Etna Town Library, Elizabeth Storrs, 761 votes, 3 write-in votes. For trustee of the trust funds, Kari Asmus, 757 votes with 6 write-ins. For Article 2, 768 yes votes, 124 no votes. Article 3, 759 yes votes, 135 no votes. For Article 4, 799 yes votes, 68 no votes. For Article 5, 742 yes votes, 135 no votes. Article 6, 831 yes votes, 57 no votes. Article 7, 855 yes votes, 33 no votes. These results will be posted tomorrow morning at the town hall in official format, but those are the results that we received tonight. Mr. Rossius, in light of the, first of all, congratulations to Mr. Callahan and Ms. Chamberlain on a successful race. I believe Mr. Rossius did want to offer some words about Mr. Christie.
Yes, I do, except I'm not really sure where to start. Because actually, Bill Garrity, a couple hours ago, was quite eloquent in his speech with regards to leaving the board in speaking a few words about Peter. And it's hard for me to really add much to the depth, much to the profundity of what he was saying. I've tried to come up with really some descriptors of what the town has owes to Peter for his years and years of service to the board, to the town. I first met Peter when we were both on the finance committee back, I don't even remember when it was, back in the 2000s, and have learned so much from Peter on how to appropriately govern, how to appropriately lead, and how to appropriately conduct business in a fair and healthy manner. I just happened to write down some adjectives. Leadership, and leadership really involves, what I've learned over the years, is a vision. And Peter has always had a vision. It's never, well, let's just wing it and see how things go. It's this is where the town should be going. This is what we think, we meaning the town, and we, the select board, think that the town citizens want the town to be going. And let's put that into action. Let's do it in the most fair and equitable fashion possible. Along with that comes compassion, and compassion for all involved. It's when you make decisions in a voting type of manner. We've seen this tonight. Not everyone is going to be happy. We've had people leave the meeting very unhappy. But it is compassion that really excels in Peter's makeup. Trying to be as fair as possible to as many people as possible, keeping the general principles of governance in mind. The next word I wrote down was details, because I go to meetings and the man has a steel trap for details. I just don't know where he stores all the data. I don't know how he recites it, and I try to do my best. I try and read and get prepared for meetings, but I'm never I'm always amazed at the details that come through. I've spoken about fairness. I'll move to loyalty. Loyalty to everyone involved. Loyalty to the town, loyalty to the state of New Hampshire, loyalty to the people on the board, and very importantly, the staff of the town, whom you see represented here in front of us by the department leaders, but making sure that everyone feels that they are important and valued. And lastly, I'll just say friendship, because Peter's been a really good friend. It's supposed to be a time of celebration, because I really want this to be a time where we should all stand up and thank Peter for all he's done for the town.
Thank you all very much. Obviously, it was a time for the changing of the guard, and I just want to give my appreciation and my thanks for the privilege of having worked for the town over these years. And it's truly been my pleasure, and we will move forward. So thank you.
Since our next article in actually involves a modest pay increase for me. I'm going to introduce our old friend, blast from the past, Steve Fowler, who preceded me as moderator for many, many years.
I want to thank everybody who stayed for my big moment here. Who's presenting 29? The article.
I am.
Okay.
Oh, I wasn't quite, what's going on here? Okay.
Go ahead.
I move that the town pursuant to RSA 32:9-B will vote to increase the meeting stipend for the town moderator from $100 per local election meeting to $125 per local election meeting, and from $500 per state election to $550 per state election.
Thank you. And do we have a second?
Oh, I get it. This took me a while. This article and the following two articles, it's an opportunity for us to raise compensation for our town moderator, our town clerk, and our supervisors of checklists. We have not raised their, they're not doing this for the big bucks. We have not raised their compensation for over 15 years, and we felt that it was time to at least acknowledge that in 15 years, they deserve a little more. When we've done a recent survey of other New Hampshire towns, Hanover actually had one of the lowest pay rates for its election officials. And as we know, there's a number of them coming up, and we felt that this was the right thing to do.
Thank you. Is there discussion on this article? You can. Hearing no discussion, call the question. Those in favor of the article passage, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. The article is passed. Congratulations.
It just took me a while.
Thank you, everybody. Moving on to Article 30, Joanna.
I move that the town pursuant to RSA 41:25 will vote to authorize the select board to increase the town clerk's compensation from $11.51 per hour to $15 per hour.
Thank you. Do I have a second on Article 30? Seconded here in the front row. Thank you. Any discussion on Article 30? Opinion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of Article 30 say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Article passes. Article 30 passes. Article 31, Ms. Whitcomb.
I move that the town pursuant to RSA 31:9-B will vote to authorize the select board to increase the hourly rate for the supervisors of checklists from $11.51 per hour to $15 per hour.
Thank you. Do I have a second for Article 31, please? I see a second here in the front row. Any questions, concerns, debate, opinion on Article 31? How many supervisors? There are 3 supervisors of the checklist here in Hanover. And by statute, I believe. Further comment, question? I'll call the question. All in favor of Article 31 say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. The article carries unanimously. Last business article, 32.
I move that the town pursuant to RSA 674:5 authorize the select board to appoint a capital improvements program committee, including at least one member of the planning board, to discuss, prepare, and amend a recommended program of municipal capital improvement projects projected over a period of at least 6 years.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you. There's a second. Any discussion, debate, comment, or opinion on Article 32? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of Article 2 say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. The motion carries. Our final article, as always, Article 33, to transact any other business that may be legally be brought before this town meeting.
Hello?
Do I have a second?
Oh,
Yes.
Sure, I'll second.
Yes, and Kari?
Yes, so I would like to ask permission of the town meeting to have included in the minutes the comments that had been prepared on behalf of the Finance Committee, but were not able to be delivered regarding the town budget. I feel that the Finance Committee worked extremely hard and long hours during this budget season as well as the last budget season. And I feel that because we are volunteers that get no pay whatsoever, that it would be a nice touch if we could nonetheless have our thoughts included in the minutes of this meeting.
So the motion on the floor is to include the comments, include the comments of the Finance Committee into the record of this meeting. So I have a second on that motion. Any questions, concerns, or opinions about the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion carries, so the
Thank you very much.
comment will be included in the record.
I will get them to Carrie tomorrow. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, Joanna.
I'd like to move that we also incorporate Peter's written comments on the budget as well. I think that they should be included.
Thank you, yes. So the motion on the floor is to include Mr. Christie's written comments on the budget, which was Article 28. Second, I have a second here. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? None opposed. So the motion to include Mr. Christie's written comments carries, so that also will be a part of the record. Any final requests? Yes, sir.
Sorry to be wearing flip-flops. My shoes were stolen. I was wondering if we could include, I know that $32,000 for the school crosswalks that we wanted to appropriate, but that the lawyer said we couldn't include in that warrant article. Could we make a new one and include that so that doesn't get left out?
We can't make a new article at this time. It hasn't been noticed, so it's just going to have to address at a later time.
Okay, I was just curious.
On that note, however, it is in the appropriations budget, so it will be spent. It's just that the taxation will have to be just that little bit much higher to incorporate. So no fear, there will be this school zone speed flashers. It's in the budget.
Thank you. Good comment. Okay, so I will take a motion to adjourn the 2023 town meeting for the town of Hanover. So moved. Do I have a second? Seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. The motion carries. Thank you, everybody.